Hey, I'm back. I know it has been a while since I made a video. I'm sorry. I have been super busy in my life and there have been a ton of updates, but I feel very strongly about this topic that I'm going to be talking about in this video today. I hope that it can help a lot of people out there. I hope the audio is okay, because there seems to be a lot going on right now where I usually make my videos. So what I wanted to talk about today is about suffering. What I wanted to talk about is how people feel today. In this context, in the West, how people are suffering, how there's so much depression, how people feel a listlessness in their lives, how people feel like there's a purposelessness in their lives. How can we transcend these feelings? How can we move towards a more whole and better self that feels fulfilled, that feels like they're moving through their life with some sort of purpose, with some sort of meaning? So why should you listen to me? I have been through quite a lot in my life. About 6 years ago, I went through some really severe medical issues. I had to spend about 2 years in and out of the hospital getting surgery, and I felt that maelstrom of horrible things happening to you that I feel many people are going through. I lost my health, I lost my close personal relationships, I lost even family members from the fallout of what it is to go through these life and death health situations. I lost almost all of my money and my career at the time, and I was very, very depressed and anxious. And I was able to move forward. It took a lot of pain and it took a lot of direct action in my life, and it was difficult. It was very difficult. But I was able to come through to the other side. It doesn't mean I'm perfect now. It doesn't mean that I'm completely healed. I don't know if that state is even possible of being perfect, but I'm much better and I have really quality relationships in my life. I have a good career going for myself. I've been able to flip all of those negatives into some positives to where I feel that I'm in a position that I can share some of that to others, because this topic I feel everyone has a connection to. Even if you are not suffering in your own life, maybe you know people who are, maybe you know people who have succumbed to the overwhelming pain of having so many things go wrong in their life that they are even no longer here because of some actions that they took because of that. I'm here to prevent that. I've had that in my life as well. I hope some of what I can share will prevent that. Okay, I'm going to lay out my argument for you right now, and then you can decide if you want to listen to me blather about the rest, okay? So here's my argument. In the West, we are hyper-fixated on qualitative measures of success. So what does that mean? We want to find things that we can measure, like you could measure in a science lab, to say whether our life is going good or bad. We want to look for things that are like, what's my weight? What is my IQ? What is my bank account? What is my follower count? These are a lot of metrics that on the surface, of course, everyone will tell you that these things don't matter. And yet, I believe that a lot of these metrics are what people are looking at and what people feel when they feel things are going poorly in their life. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you money doesn't matter. Of course it matters. And I really, truly understand that, it's not one pillar of your life that falls that makes you fall into these states of deep depression, but it's several that fall, right? Having bad relationships, not having any money, maybe having a poor health, feeling like no one is listening to you, that is going to lead to these deep bouts of depression. And I think part of that in the West comes from a long history of the West's relationship with science and how it has been moved into the culture top down from a lot of elites, and not ignoring the great things that technology and science has done for us, but maybe that people focus on those measures too much and they don't focus on these other measures. They are not focusing on, am I an honest person? Am I a good person? Am I kind? Am I charitable? Am I just? Am I in relationships with people who also hold those virtues, that also seek to put those virtues into their life? When you focus on these things, these aspects that are not measurable by science, by scientific means, when you ensure that your relationships are based more on these virtues, then you will quickly realize that, one, there are so many more dimensions to yourself than your weight or your bank account or account, etc. That these dimensions of yourself are other places that you can work on yourself, or perhaps the scales are not so weighed against you. Some people who may not have the best bank accounts going on, but they are truly kind people, they are good people, people who may be suffering from bad health, but their quality of life is pulled up in other measures. And I found that coming out of my well of depression was trying to seek these individual pillars of wellness and well-being, finding that there were other aspects of myself outside of the material, quantifiable measures of myself, and building those up in my life. So what I think is really interesting, and I will definitely try to link some resources in the description about these podcasts and videos that I've watched that were sort of making me think about these things, is the scientific revolution. I know, it sounds weird, going way back. But it cannot be overstated how much that shifted the trajectory of the West. You see, many philosophers have spoken about this. Many great thinkers through time. One of my favorites of all time, Stefan Molyneux, in his The Truth About Sadism series, I think it's part 5 or 6, I'll put it in the description. He also talks about this, and I think he puts it in one of the most succinct and beautiful, artful ways ever, which is that before the scientific revolution, people lived their lives towards pleasing God. They were convinced that this world was completely ephemeral, that this world was a veil of tears that you had to get through to get to heaven, that it was full of temptation, it was full of suffering, that so much of the material world had to be struggled through, but it was not your life. What you lived for and who you were as a person was rather put towards God. And after the scientific revolution, after we start having these massive breakthroughs in agriculture, which allows there to be a surplus of food, to allow for there to be an intelligentsia, then breakthroughs in medicine and technology that build the quality of life for people, that faith is lost in God and in Christianity. And it is not just faith, but the culture, the trajectory, the belief of purposefulness that people are living their everyday lives for. They are no longer living their lives for these abstract concepts. They are more so living their lives towards this scientific, material, rational world. You know, after I listened to that podcast, I have been always a fan of the Adam Curtis documentaries. They are truly brilliant. He's a British documentator, and they always grapple with these very large ideas, very interesting aspects of culture and psychology and philosophy, and how they intersect with great world events and how those great world events were influenced today. So in his Pandora's Box series, he really gets into this idea that I'm talking about now. In part 2, he starts talking about the Rand Corporation. So the Rand Corporation was developed after World War II. During World War II, there was this very interesting progression in the way scientists related with the government and with society. So before, they had been really siloed into their particular careers. And during World War II, they were encouraged to interact across disciplines, biology and physics and computer and mathematics. It was a burgeoning computer technologies at the time. And once these scientists started being able to share their ideas with each other, started to build these ideas into the science that we have today, after World War II, they were worried that all of this work that had been done to bring the scientific communities together and to build the future of science and technology and rationality in the West, that it would be lost. So the Rand Corporation was built in order to sequester a lot of these people, a lot of these ideas, and bring them into the future. Now, what's really interesting is during the Cold War, JFK and then Lyndon Johnson really believed in this idea. They saw not only what it had been able to do for war, what rationality and science had been able to do in the war, but not only what it had been able to do in the war, but what it would be able to do for society. Could we apply scientific and rational means to solving things like welfare, or racial disputes, or how governments are run in the first place? So they were very, very interested in utilizing the Rand Corporation, and utilizing them not just in the Cold War, but domestically. And one thing that is so interesting about this documentary, one piece that stuck with me, is that they began to apply these ideas to the war. You know, it's very difficult in war to understand if you're winning. How are things going? It can be hard to see on a day-to-day level for the strategists, for the people in Washington, how it's going. So part of being able to see how the war was going was to make these metrics, sort of these similar metrics that I was talking about before. They started talking about, they made these metrics like how many feet were won in a day, how many tons of food were destroyed for the enemy. These metrics were created by the Rand strategists and the people back in Washington to be able to say, are we winning? Are we winning the war? So things like how many feet were gained in a day, how many metric tons of bombs were dropped, how many tons of food of the enemies were destroyed, became the measures of whether the war was being won or not. And yet, in order to retain power, in order to make the people at home believe things were going well in Vietnam, these qualitative measures of success were corrupted. And one thing that really stuck with me was a serviceman who said he was working, he was in the military in Vietnam, and there was someone running away from them who had appeared, and they shot them, as was operating procedure at the time. They shot this person, and when they went to see who exactly they were, it was a middle-aged woman who was unarmed. He made his report, and by the time this report got back to Washington, this unarmed woman, middle-aged woman that had been killed, had become a Viet Cong with Chinese communist grenades who was actively trying to ambush them. That through these measures of trying to see whether the war was being won, they had been corrupted. These quantitative, qualitative measures had been corrupted. and corrupted from a top-down measure, from the heights of the government, in order to retain power. Now, what I wanted to talk about isn't Vietnam. It's not about how throughout the 60s and the Cold War, the RAND strategists and how science became very important, not only to our government, but to our culture. But I'm just trying to tie this thread to today. Why today people feel so depressed, feel so distraught. And it is my contention that getting better, pulling yourself out of these feelings of depression, pulling your life out of a purposelessness state will be twofold. And it is kind of counterintuitive, because one of them is somewhat of what I talked about in my last video, Becoming Smarter, that intelligence is honesty across contexts. Hyper-rationality in the way that you would bring to your job or your bank account or whatever, applying those to your relationships and other contexts is what is going to help you. And the other side that I'm talking about a little bit more in this video, if we can get focused here, is the other side, the transcendent side, the side of rejecting society's focus and hyper-fixation on these measures of success in one's life, and being able to tread your own path, or tread a more ancient path, this path where we are looking towards virtue, we're looking towards our relationships and how we move in the world. And I think part of what helped me get better, and part of what I think might help others to get better, is this rejection of the modern world, in this sense, the rejection of the fixation on quantitative measures of success. And it will be finding a transcendent part of yourself. Look, I'm speaking to you, I'm making a logical argument to you right now. Now, I'm not a materialist. I don't believe that only the material world is what is here. But if you are a materialist, at least you could admit that there are some transcendental categories. Integers don't exist in the world, but they exist. That does not mean that they are subjective. Logic, you can't put it under a microscope, and yet without logic, I wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be listening to me. So we admit that there are some transcendental categories that are important. It is raining on me, on my camera. I have the umbrella out right now. This video is too important. I'm not going to stop here, all right? I'm a little dark. Okay, yeah, that's better. That there are categories that exist outside the material world. And my argument to you is you also have categories of the self that exist outside of the material world. Categories that are important. Now, people who are artistic will understand this immediately. People who are creative intuitively understand that there are aspects of the self that are not entirely in this world. If you have had an imagination, or you've created, or you've had deep dreams or hypnotic states that help you create your art, you sort of intuitively understand. You can really understand those ancient stories of someone being channeled as if by a muse, or it's raining. I had to move under the cover of the trees to hopefully be able to finish this video because of the rain. What I'm trying to say is you can develop this side of yourself if you do not have it. I think spending time in nature, meditating, maybe connecting yourself to morality, transcendent morality. Not for everyone, but for me it was religion and Christianity. Deepening my relationship with these things helped me understand that moral categories are very true and important in my life and in the world. and that by seeking these categories and moving towards trying to live my life in alignment with them helped me get a lot better. Now, living in alignment with them is difficult. It is difficult because our world is not aligned with these moral categories. So you might have some difficulty. You probably definitely will have some difficulty emotionally with your relationships with significant others, your family members, friends. But I am telling you that uplifting these pillars, uplifting yourself to understand that these things are important and moving towards them is what starts to help the other pillars. And then once you can build a foundation for yourself, you don't feel so distraught, so lost, so listless, and life becomes more manageable. I want to tell you, you can do it. There is a beautiful future that is possible for you. There is a future where your dreams can come to fruition. I want to tell you that you're cared for, even when it doesn't feel like that anyone cares about you. You are cared for. You do have purpose. For me, that comes from Christ and from the good people in the world. I know it sounds kind of crazy when you have nothing, but it is true that if you can increase your relationship with yourself, increase your relationship with the transcendent, then it is so much easier to find good people in your life, to find good people in the world who do care, who are good people, who will help you become better and you can help them become better. It's really a beautiful and exciting thing, and my journey through it is part of why I'm making this video, and hopefully help people who are suffering so deeply right now. I do want to leave off this video and say, if you are in this state, please get help. Be honest with people you think you can trust, and if you don't have people in your life, there's plenty of hotlines. Go to therapy if that is possible, because it is so important to me, and I promise you to others, that you are here and that you find what you need to do in the world. It's so important, because I assure you, those close to you in your life will be very happy that you were able to share these things with them rather than hide them and suffer in silence. That's all I got. Please let me know what you thought. Hopefully this can start some sort of conversation. I will link my resources in the description, and I will be back to you sooner rather than later. Thank you.